Welcome back to the Stormcrow Show. I'm Brady.
And I'm Josh. And today we're talking about, we're kind of summarizing a variety of new changes and products that have come out over the last month or two with Magic the Gathering and giving you our thoughts on them. And in addition to that, we're also going to quickly, point out a trend that we are kind of noticing with what Wizards seems to be doing with these changes and give you our thoughts on that as well.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, Brady, why don't we start off right away? What's the first product that we want to cover?
Yeah, so this is the Signature Spellbook, which is a set of 9 cards. It's a premium product. It's going to be replacing the From the Vault series and is going to be based around a character from the Magic storyline. So the first one we're getting is Jace.
Sure.
And as a result of that, it includes a bunch of blue spells, including cards like Threads of Disloyalty, Gifts Ungiven, and Jace Beleren.
Okay.
My biggest thing with this is, call me a cheapskate, whatever, I don't care. But, I mean, the MSRP is $20 US, and I feel like these cards are good, but I'm not sure if I would personally buy them. Though the artwork is really great.
Sure.
I mean, this kind of stuff would look great in a commander deck or in a cube or something like that. It's a cool product. So we'll have to see where this goes. But I do like this initial one. I just think the price might be a little bit high considering the cards we're getting in there. And I'm sure we can include a link for the entire card list so you guys can look it over and give us your thoughts.
Yeah. All right, and so then going on to the second product, or I should say the second change, many of you all, of course, by the way, everything that we're covering today you probably already know. We just want to give our thoughts on it real quickly. I know Wizards mentioned as they were starting spoilers for Masters 25 that Modern Masters, or basically any Masters set based on a format, is going to be discontinued. They will still have Master sets, they'll just be themed now. I'm going to just simply say that I think that this is a mistake. I'm not saying they can't make it good with themed Masters, don't misunderstand me when I say that, but I just don't think this is exactly what they really need to be doing, but this is what they're doing. We might have to actually do an entire video kind of discussing the concerns I have further and maybe what they could do to make themed Master sets super successful, especially in light of what's been going on with Masters 25 and Iconic Masters to some extent as well. But, I don't want to be a downer about this or anything, but,
it's a good discussion point.
Yeah, I'm not particularly thrilled with this decision. I don't think this is really what they should have been doing, but
sure,
it is what it is. Brady, what's our next product?
The next one is the Dual Decks, which by the time this video comes out, Elves versus Inventors will be out. And it is the final Dual Deck. They are discontinuing them. And personally, I feel like this Dual Deck that they've given us is very, very average. Like, it's not great, but it's not terrible. Some of the decks way back when had really meaningful reprints like Remand and Demonic Tutor.
Sure.
Even cards like Coalition Relic. This one didn't really have as much of that going for it. So I feel like it's not really like a high note that they're going out on. But at the same time, this looks pretty good. It's got Azuri, it's got Darksteel Plate, Solemn Simulacrum, just good playable cards. Okay. So I like it, but it definitely wasn't their best one ever. That being said, though, I'm probably still going to pick up a copy sooner or later.
Sure. So it sounds like at least it's a decent ending point. Yeah.
It's definitely not like, this is not the worst one we've ever seen.
Okay. All right, well, that's good. That's good. All right, so going on to the product that's technically replacing Dual Decks, which are Challenger decks. And these are basically pre-made decks or pre-constructed decks that are standard playable. They'll only have standard playable cards. And there's 4 of them, at least for this round, including one that has both Chandra, Torch of Defiance, and Hazoret from Amonkhet. And what's interesting to me is that this is really amazing. I think this is really good. I think this is definitely one of their better changes that they've made. I do want to caution, and it's not, again, not to be a downer, just don't get your hopes up like so high and then like something happens and you're like, oh, why? But like you'll notice, like I think it's the Mardu Vehicles product version Challenger deck. That one has 4 Heart of Kirans, I think. And I mean, it's a good card and it's very standard playable, and even modern playable to some extent. But the fact is that I don't know if I would always expect for future Challenger decks to necessarily have like 4 copies of a Mythic that at least was very playable. That could change, of course. Though with Dominaria coming out, I would say there's going to be some good Challenger decks coming from sourced from that as well. So it's not like they're going to have bad options to work with.
Yeah, and I guess the key thing to keep in mind with the Challenger decks is that they're only going to be as good as what is currently in Standard, which the dual decks never had to worry about that because they were just pulling cards from wherever they wanted.
Right.
Whereas the Challenger decks, they're going to be limited to Standard.
Yep.
So that could be a good thing or a bad thing. You know, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, so speaking of new, however, there's a new format that's come out.
Yeah, so this is Brawl, which many of you have heard of it. It's basically Commander for Standard. It's a 60-card singleton format. And for me, I've never been much of a Standard player, but if there was one thing that was going to get me into Standard, this is probably coming the closest.
Sure.
And I can definitely see where new players who are trying to get into the game, that this would definitely draw them in, because all they have to do is draft like maybe a few times, maybe pick up one of the new Challenger decks or something along those lines, and they can build a reasonable deck.
Yep.
And they can also sit down with people who have played for a long, long time. And I don't think the variance level is going to be super high.
Sure.
Simply because they're limited to the cards in Standard and how good that those can be. Now, obviously, there's going to be some learner's curve, but the fact is, I don't think a new player is going to get blown out of the water as hard as playing a game of Commander with, you know.
Well, plus it's theoretically cheaper because you might be able to build it from a few drafts as opposed to, I need to get my food chain, or something like that, for Commander. So I think this is I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
actually, on the whole, they did that.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of fun to play.
So the last thing, quickly covering, and we already mentioned Dominaria in an earlier episode, but we just want to mention again. I mean, look at these reprints. I mean, Gilded Lotus, the enemy color or enemy dual lands, the check lands or buddy lands as they call them. Some of the new cards they printed, like the sort of Baneslayer 2.0.
Yeah.
Damping Sphere. I mean, there's just a lot of fun cards here. This really feels like this feels like this is a set I actually do want to go and draft. I mean, I've always seen these sets, but this is one I definitely would love to have a chance to draft.
Yeah.
And might go out of my way to actually try to do that again. On the whole, I'm actually pretty impressed, though.
Yeah, I mean, I've been blown away, especially by the uncommons.
Yeah.
Like, the rares, they look pretty good. The mythics, they look pretty good. The uncommons, to me, that's what's kind of making this, like, a much better looking set, in my opinion. I mean, when you consider that you could probably build a Commander deck around Slimefoot the Stowaway, if you have a sack outlet and infinite mana, which is not as hard as it sounds.
Non-Commander.
You can just auto-kill everybody at the table, potentially, with just damage.
Sure.
I mean, or it might be loss of life, but either way, the fact is, this is incredible considering that this is a legendary creature at uncommon. Like, that's what's the kicker.
Yeah.
So, kicker. I just realized that's in the set, too.
Yeah, I'm glad they brought the mechanic back. That was a good...
Yeah, kicker's fun.
That was a good safe bring back. I'm glad they did that. All right, so switching gears a little bit. So I noticed a trend. Now, we all know that Standard, new sets like Dominaria or expansion sets, I guess, as opposed to reprint products like Masters sets, the new sets always make the most money for Wizards. Those tend to sell a lot more. They're drafted more, etc., etc., etc.
Yep.
It's interesting that there's been a strong push by Wizards. It's interesting, but not surprising. That is, that there seems to be a strong emphasis to really create like standard as one concept, and then not standard another concept. To clarify, like obviously. There's Modern, there's Legacy, there's Vintage, there's Commander. There's all these other formats. And those still exist, but you would have those mentioned. You'd have Standard and Modern and so forth. Now it seems like they're trying to get you to the idea of there's Standard and there's not Standard. They get rid of the Modern Master sets. Modern still exists as a format, and it still gets more support from like even Dominaria with Damping Sphere. But there's a less of an emphasis on Modern as a format by doing that. Similarly, the dual decks, a lot of less emphasis on the reprints, but more emphasis on standard decks with challenger decks.
Yep.
And then, of course, Brawl. Like, they don't want to replace Commander. They never will replace Commander. It's just too popular, especially... I think it's just going to be it's just too strong of a format.
Yep.
And same with these other ones. But again, Brawl is kind of this standard... Because it all rotates by the standard rotation schedule, so... At least that's a current rule. I know there's some hopes by some people that it would change. But at the end of the day, Brawl is kind of the standard for Commander, as you pointed out. Again, a strong emphasis on buying the newest standard cards, not so much on reprints and older master sets. And of course, Dominaria itself has that sort of double-edged sword where it brings back these memories of, like I said, Baneslayer, but now they have Baneslayer 2.0.
Yeah.
And... Again, not surprising, especially in light of what happened last year with all the bannings and stuff like that. I mean, it was a pretty bad year for Standard, let's be completely candid.
Yeah.
How many bannings was it? 7 bannings overall for Standard?
Something like that. It was high.
Yeah.
Much higher than it should have been. So.
Yeah. So, I think it's worth noting that Wizards definitely wants to kind of really push Standard to be, this is what you're supposed to play. If you want to play Modern, that's fine. You can play Commander, that's fine. They don't have a problem with that. But they really want people to get back into Standard. And they're trying to do that by both create new products and formats that re-emphasize it, but also take away products that seem to pull away from that in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. And, like, again, I'm not much of a Standard player. These challenger decks look amazing.
Yes.
Like, I mean, again, I don't think I'd ever play them in Standard. Mostly I'm looking at, like, certain cards from each deck.
Yeah.
But they still look really good. And if you wanted to pick them up and you wanted to go to your FNM at your LGS, do it. Do it. Like, I mean, you might still get torn to shreds by somebody who's playing, like, the highly tuned version of your deck.
Sure.
But it's at least a starting point for new players or even just people who don't want to go out and buy singles or something like that. It's a good starting point.
Yeah. Well, I think we're kind of running out of time. So at this point, I would say, what are your thoughts? Does this sound like a reasonable decision? Do you think that these products are really worth what they're being asked for? What other things would you have preferred to see Wizards do? What else do you want us to talk about? All those sorts of questions that may be plaguing your mind late at night after you've eaten 6 brownies.
I always eat 7 brownies before bed.
Yeah, that's how you sleep better at night?
Amen to that.
Okay. Well, anyways, thank you so much for watching. My name is Josh.
I'm Brady.
And this has been The Storm Crow Show.